Thank you for joining us. We are now about to begin our panel chat on Tech for Good, harnessing emerging technologies to do good. Please feel free to enter questions in the Q&A tab on the right side of the screen. The moderator will take them at the end if time permits. I will now hand things over to Sophia Wren, or actually I will be handing things over to Chris Brumer, who will be your moderator today.
Thank you so very much. We have an extraordinary panel today, and really one that's focusing on some of the most cutting edge issues. It's so rare that we have the opportunity to think about blockchain technologies and the public good. But when you think about the common leitmotif of fintech, it's always been based on this concept of greater financial access, greater opportunity, really throughout the space, whether or not you're thinking about crowdfunding or blockchain technologies or mobile lending. And it's useful to have these conversations from time to time to really center in and to think about what that means in practice. We have a great panel, and so I think I'll just allow us all to kind of go around sort of to introduce yourselves in maybe 30-second sound bites, and then we'll jump headfirst into this conversation to think again about what it means to employ these new cutting-edge financial services in a way that really speaks to our greatest moral aspirations. I think I'll start off with Eva, since you are the most senior of us, and as a official member of the European Parliament. Maybe you can introduce yourself to the audience.
It sounds like I'm like the older, so it doesn't sound very good, but thank you so much for having me. It's good to be among like good friends. I'm a member of the European Parliament. I worked on drafted the first blockchain resolution here 2-3 years ago, and now expecting to work on the legislation of crypto assets, chairing the science and technology, a think tank basically inside the European Parliament, coming from Greece, and I'm happy to be a member of the blockchain family philosophy actually. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Valery.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Valerie Vavilov. I'm founder and CEO of Bitfury Group. I'm the technologist all my life in computer science. And my biggest dream and passion right now is to find a way how to help humanity to switch from global competition to global collaboration, because I truly believe once we learn how to collaborate between all of us, the development of this world will become much safer, easier, and faster.
Collaboration is at times in a little bit of short supply nowadays, for sure. Brian.
Hi, I'm Brian Bellandorf. I'm Executive Director of Hyperledger, which is a project hosted at the Linux Foundation, where for the last 5 years, we've been building supportive technologies for building out enterprise blockchain, enterprise distributed ledger networks and applications. It was the social impact application of this technology and the public sector application of this that pulled me in. I think it was really the use case of land titles in emerging markets that made me go, okay, this is something traditional technology has not yet solved, and a central database just will not do. And since that time, we've seen deployment in a lot of different fields. I also recently participated in a committee that drafted a blockchain plan for the state of California for how it would be used for all sorts of administrative and regulatory and frankly very boring purposes, but intended to bring much more trust, much more resiliency, much less corruption to government use. And I think that's very much tied to its potential for a social impact.
Okay, Ron Melamed, yeah, I think you're the furthest from us right now.
Yeah, I'm based in Singapore, so now it's practically night. It's just past 11 p.m.
Maybe you can introduce yourself.
Hi, so I'm head of business development for Orbs. Orbs is a blockchain protocol intended for the use of, it's a permissionless public blockchain protocol built for the use of enterprise and government. I've been with the company from day one. relocated to Asia about 2 years ago in order to develop our business on ground here. We've been doing some great stuff around here and globally. It's pretty much it. We've done some interesting project in which, as part of the discussion, I'd be happy to share more about.
Great, thank you so much. And last but not least, Richard.
So first, great to be part of this panel. My background, actually, I come originally out of the financial industry, and I've always been passionate about turning the financial industry into something which is of the standard and quality as we take granted in technology. So that has been my clear focus. I have seen blockchain quite early on as an opportunity to rewire the traditional financial industry and kind of leverage the power and bring those aspects together. But what I really think and what I'm trying to achieve is let's build a society which is science-based and help governments to execute on their mandates by leveraging the full potential of the internet. And I think the opportunity here is to broaden our understanding of what's possible within that technology. So, I cover hands-on experience as a fintech entrepreneur with science-based approaches and trying to get the interconnectivity going, and also there create a open impact foundation as a think tank which can complement an organization such as GBBC to bring another perspective from a kind of scientific engineering cross-disciplinary approach to bring these different disciplines together. So great fun to be here.
Well, I think that I'll start with you going backwards, Richard, and then maybe with Ron and Brian. But when you talk about collaboration and interconnectivity, what's your view, on the open source movement? I mean, there has been, particularly in the space, which is a little bit unusual sometimes in finance, a spirit of collaboration in the blockchain community. And how has that sort of contributed to using technology for good? And where do you think there's work to be done?
So first of all, open source as a general concept is absolutely great. No doubt about that. The DeFi movement, which I don't know how familiar some of you are, it's unbelievable what can be done by connecting the pieces. What is a big gap is a scientific-based approach to take an engineering discipline way of thinking, of trying to understand how can we address the problems of modern society. So this today is not happening. The governments are being challenged and the companies are being challenged, but we don't take a strategic view of taking an engineering mind and getting the best minds together to kind of leverage what we have and utilize one tool, open source, as kind of facilitating, speeding up kind of this process of adoption.
Ron, what do you say to that? What's your perspective?
So I would say that the open source movement, obviously, in the collaboration is at the base and the heart of blockchain. And I think for us, in many partners and many customers that we work with, the number one question that we always ask, and I think it's still it's not the billion-dollar question, why blockchain? And the reason and what we're always trying to get at is if there's no there's no problem with collaboration, then there's probably not that big of a need for blockchain. So I think combining the two and combining this, this shift of paradigm, that how can we collaborate with someone that we don't know and maybe do not necessarily trust, this stands, in my view, at the heart of, the open source movement. How can I work on some project with someone at the other end of the world and I can be sure that he's being as reliable as I'm trying to be? Same goes for blockchain. So it's just, taking it another step further to actual collaboration, something that has value and not only, developing code together.
Yeah, and Brian, do you have that same critique?
Well, given my career for the last 25 years has been to be immersed in kind of the open source space in one way or another, it's sometimes hard to like pop out of that and try to get perspective. But open source software is pretty much table stakes, is pretty much presumed now in every major new technology movement. And I don't care if it's cloud computing, where, I mean, cloud computing as a domain would not have happened if not for Linux and for widespread availability of these kinds of technologies, containerization, AI, and you know, or something like that, or even today special effects houses, or drone software, or all these other fields now. Open source is really de rigueur, and it's partly because, in particular in this space, trust is such an essential part of this. If you're going to trust a platform, trust the technology, rather than trusting the brand name of the company behind it, you have to be able to see what that technology is. You have to be able to see how it operates, and you need the ability to adapt it, the ability to improve it, the ability to fix a bug in real time when that bug is suddenly causing funds to be able to be stolen from somebody, right? That's the community has to be able to respond. And I think actually the open source community has shown us a way to build technologies that are bigger than any of us, and to work as a community when problems arise without depending upon central actors in that system to solve the problems for us in a way that's very different from cloud computing, and pretty different from the way people think about AI traditionally working as well. And so what's powerful about the blockchain space and about the role that open source has played is that the way that it forms this collaborative connective tissue, and gives everybody kind of some freedoms that ordinarily they wouldn't have thought of associated with technology.
So I guess I'll
Well, actually, I would say you are exactly to the point. So the reason I got more involved into the blockchain technology and trying to understand it was the idea of decentralization, and it was actually this revolutionary spirit that attracted me to understand it even more. So imagine if we managed to have more secure, democratic, and open access safeguards for our governance structures. The moment that we faced a huge crisis because of the over-centralization in our finance systems and the central banks controlling everything. So I come, as I said, from Greece, experiencing that this cannot and should not be the only option for citizens. So I think instead of like now competing for scarce resources, it would be, as Valerie also mentioned, it would be much better to have the possibility to share knowledge and benefit all. Besides the technological challenges, now with blockchain, if you build properly the infrastructure and the software, you can manage to have more collaboration, more sharing, a positive impact, and make the world a better place and create value. So I do believe that we can have trusted systems based on sharing and open source than on trusting centralized structures. So I have the feeling that we are shifting towards this kind of models, and I'm happy to see that. I feel that Europe is very open to that. So I think we have a governance model in Europe that likes to give back control to the citizens. And you mentioned also the word like privacy and surveillance. So with this pandemic, what we saw is that we had to give up a lot of like privacy in order to be safe in the discussion of like applications that would like we would have to share our health data and our location. And the most worrying thing was that when you asked citizens, and I was impressed, do you prefer to have like privacy or safety? Everybody said safety. So they were ready to give up their privacy. So in Europe, we try to balance that. You should have both. You should be able to have privacy and safety. Why should it be one or the other? So I think that with open source software and philosophy, we can achieve to have both, and the technology can give us both.
Can I just, as a follow-up, do you get a sense that response that you received was an international, or sorry, was a European-wide response? That there was a preference for safety over privacy?
It was a European event, so it was like European citizens responding to that. I guess that it's the same everywhere. I mean, I don't know if I could get the same response in China, but in China, I've read some some studies, and it seems that citizens are more familiar and more not open, but at least they have experienced how it is to not have privacy. And if you have a problem with privacy, then something's wrong with you, not the government. So I don't know if they can have the same understanding and mentality that the Europeans have. But as Europeans had the same feeling, I think we should not even ask this question. They should be able to have both. And we should be able, like in Europe, to influence other countries that we collaborate with to follow the same standards of respecting the need to have both, and we can have both with our technologies.
Valerie, as a private sector market participant who's looking at these things, what's your idea? What's your perspective on the co-optation potentially of blockchain technology?
Yeah, I fully agree with Eva, but privacy and safety both are very important. Yeah, and I believe what blockchain technology can really solve this. Why? Because blockchain, what is blockchain technology? Is just a trust. Yeah. If you use blockchain, you can trust the data. If you trust the data, you don't need to validate the data all the time. Yeah. In this case, you can even do not have access to the data, but if this data is saved or protected by the blockchain, you can trust the data what you don't see. And this could lead to the systems where you have both safety and privacy at the same time. This is, I think, very important aspect of the blockchain. Another thing on governance, I think very important for the governance is to be adaptive, yeah, because the world is changing so fast. We're moving so fast. We're inventing something new every single year, yeah. Every 10 years, we're completely changing some fields of our knowledge, yeah. And if we don't adapt fast, we will be too late. Yeah, technology will go forward, and we as a humanity and as a society will be somewhere at the backstage. So that's why. And there is a Darwin saying, yeah, not the strongest survives, but the most the ones who learn how to adapt faster, yeah. And that's why I think it's very important to have different kind of sandbox approaches in different countries, where technologists and inventors can just test the technology without strict regulation, and can adapt the technology to the people needs. Yeah, and if the community supports it, why not? And there was different examples where, for example, some of the crypto exchanges did the collaboration where they created self-regulation. Because they cannot wait until a regulator issues some rules. Yeah, they need to move forward. Yeah, and they just created community, did self-regulation, and it worked fine. Yeah, at least they tried something. They have the data, they have some experience, and they can go to the governments and provide different options how to regulate this.
Yeah, we're already getting quite a few comments about whether or not zero knowledge proofs support users and privacy and the like, but even that goes to this question of governance. How important is governance in the blockchain space, especially when it comes to decentralized networks? I mean, we just heard one example for the crypto exchanges, but as an industry, has the industry learned how to implement good governance, and what has the industry been able to achieve concretely, and what are the most sort of important aspects of work to be done? Brian, you've been thinking about these issues. What do you think?
I think good governance comes in the form of many layers, and it comes in the form of practicing minimum viable governance. And let me talk about this for a sec, just to even put aside blockchain technology. When it comes to internet technology, we've had governance at different layers for quite a long time, right? You have the governance of how the domain name system works through organizations like ICANN. You have governance over what kinds of TLS certificates are accepted as between browsers and servers to help give that little green lock icon that lets you know you're really talking to your bank or whomever. And that's an organization called the CA Browser Forum. There are governance around the standards, groups like the IETF and the W3C. And then there's governance around the technology development, the Apache Software Foundation, the Mozilla Foundation. All these are very different forms. But what tended to be most successful were the organizations that were most open in how they worked, the most transparent, the most participatory. The ones that had pathways in for organizations and for individuals, no matter like where their standing was, but the value of their contributions were, the objective value of that were what mattered. Sort of a duocracy, as we call it. And really, the successful ones practicing what again I've called minimum viable governance. That ability to say, what's the smallest bit that we can do, that we can agree upon in order to unlock this other bigger value for all of us on the edges and all of us in a network effects kind of way. And I think the cryptocurrency communities have actually done a really good job, Bitcoin and Ethereum, in laying that kind of low-level groundwork. The kind of essential plumbing for a lot of that. Although for lots of purposes, there's been a need for permission blockchain networks as well, whether for performance or for an additional layer of confidentiality, that sort of thing. But where the interesting governance networks lie are on the kind of layers above. How should the diamond industry regulate itself when it comes to the traceability of diamonds? And there, being able to build upon real-world regulatory kind of systems, such as in the diamond industry, something called the Kimberley process, and then being able to map that to the players and to the data formats sitting on the ledger, and to say, okay, we're going to accept signatures from everybody who's agreed to the Kimberley process, or is perhaps even certified by the people who operate certifications in that domain. And then when I try to look at the provenance of this diamond, I'll make sure that it's been handed off one party to the next, from parties who've been certified that way. So we really just need to recognize governance happens at these layers, where it's most open and most transparent, it's most effective. There's still a need sometimes for confidentiality or kind of bounds to those communities, but diversity is what gets us perhaps to the best place from a competitive point of view.
Yeah, Richard, what's your view? I mean, we've heard some examples as to sort of effective standard setting that has, arisen in other contexts. The Kimberley process is an interesting example. Very interesting concept of sort of minimally viable governance. What's your sense as to both the importance of governance in, again, a decentralized ecosystem, and what has the industry learned, and what more does it have to learn?
So I think we're facing a big problem in the sense we have a nascent technology that has a huge potential. We're overly focused on what we today understand. And for example, a big problem which I have in the debate about blockchain, the potential of tokenization and creating financial markets for literally everything is not understood. The third is that in this blockchain space, the ICO debacle of having a lot of scams has not been addressed. So what is needed? We need a group of people who, literally takes an engineering discipline approach. Says, we want an airplane which flies. What is necessary? And we really do science and say, these are the necessary building blocks which we need. And what we also have to do is we have to think, how can we achieve that fast? because the world as it is burning. And we have to take this scientific approach, be inspired by comments such as Brian's, etc., but then use also the beauty of nature. Because if you study biology, you see the many different mechanisms which are in place in nature to regulate certain things. And in the same spirit, we need very different solutions for the different type of problems. So this is how I see it.
And Ron, I mean, you have to navigate different kinds of environments and governance mechanisms. I mean, you engage or interface with them in your everyday sort of activities. Where's the work to be done?
So I think governance is perhaps one of the most complicated topics out there when it comes to defining and designing a new specific solution, whether for a specific industry or any other type of use case that is trying to be tackled with blockchain. Almost everywhere, every project that we've done, it had to be completely rethought from scratch because every use case was unique, especially in different sectors. It was always a challenge, and it was always something that, again, really need to be, I think that a major portion of the time spent on project was how to design a governance. And again, because it's so new, and because it's so new for the participants, like they're used to centralized system. In centralized system, right? Yeah, I'm making all the shots, right? I'm calling all the shots, but it's not like that anymore. And I think that, again, it was much more complicated than the technology implementation by itself. And I think that it was Richard who mentioned DeFi. I think that if something we can learn from some DeFi projects that are now ongoing and of course are gaining a lot of traction is the sophistication in some of the governance models that they're implementing. And I think it will be these are very interesting examples that we can all learn from on how to do it right and how not to do it right, by the way. But I think governance is no doubt one of the most complicated topics out there when it comes to blockchain.
The flip side of governance is in some ways rights, right? I mean, so you have like a governance and you have rules, and embedded in those rules are different kinds of rights that individuals can have. And that strikes up some earlier remarks that Eva had made. Eva, and as you see much more commercial activity sort of shifting to the digital realm, as more of our lives are lived in the digital realm, and as you see, the sort of nascent governance or self-governance activity, what efforts are being made or should be made to safeguard our digital rights, and both from the governmental perspective and from the perspective of what you would expect to see from industry.
Well, sorry. Yes, it's open. So I wouldn't say this is easy to solve. So the matrix for governance, it's quite complicated. And one of the problems is that you have to start the designing of it in the beginning, and then you have to balance the trust and the stability it should have with the ability to evolve and upgrade and change once new challenges are there. So testing these the blockchain applications for different uses in the public sector, we realized that we had wrong in some cases the governance model from scratch, and problems we had was of course GDPR, privacy issues, what kind of data sets we could use, the governance of data sets that doesn't exist yet, so it's not clear. So I would say that in order to continue and solve this matrix, we have to definitely have transparency, so to make sure that everybody will understand what's the initial governance model, how much it can involve and upgrade, what is the need of consensus, how much, who will decide, and when, and how far they could go. We definitely need to have transparency in information and verification once we get more people involved. So it depends also how you use that and when you use that. And maybe we have to clarify a bit what are like the basic models we should follow on blockchain for different applications. So it is complex, but I think that at least in Europe now we are starting to have to unbundle a bit the problems we need to solve to create legal certainty. So we're going to have a data strategy, an AI strategy, and digital finance strategy. I think one of the parts that it's really basic is to have data governance, as I said. So what kind of data sets can you use, up to which point you can share them. I think this would help a lot to have a good basis. And of course, to make sure, again, that you have legal certainty because you understand the jurisdiction, the challenges, and then you can achieve interoperability, and then you can have also more people to participate. And if it grows, if a platform grows bigger and you have more people participating, it becomes more solid and more democratic, but it could also face bigger challenges there because of the complex. So I think we should try to unbundle it a bit and try to solve the principles and having a trusted beginning basis there. So we need transparency, we need clear information, we need to have the model, and we also need to be able to, as I said, evolve and upgrade in the beginning. So I think this would be the start, or at least this is how we're looking at things. And as I said, again, we did face problems that our design of governance was not working. I will give you also the example without being more specific than that, but we were trying to have a certification on blockchain, and it was quite challenging. Also, it sounds as the most easy application, but it was challenging because the design of it was not the right one from the beginning.
Well, design is critical for more reasons than just one, in terms of how it works, but also how effectively it works. I guess how something works, there's always a spectrum, and you can have problems like data biases, particularly when you move into the AI world. Brian, how can decentralization sort of speak to the challenge of data bias, and what does we need to do to make that possible?
Oh, that's a big question. Sometimes blockchain and AI feel like very unrelated technologies, perhaps even with very different worldviews. AI is all about consuming large amounts of data, sifting through them, and trying to form pattern matching engines, right? And the more data, the better. Just go and absorb it all, put it in one big pile. And sometimes blockchain feels like small batch artisanal data, which is really focused on this transaction in order, preventing double spend, doing these things that aren't really about shoving terabytes of data into a big data lake. And yet I think they can play on each other in some important ways. One of the most impactful parts of the GDPR regulations, for example, has been reintroducing really this concept that the subjects of that data, who that data is about, and the sources, the people who gave you their data, really have a vested stake in how that data is used, and in the ability perhaps to flag and say, I don't want my data propagated on, or I affirmatively do grant consent. And using a blockchain to actually track those consents, and most importantly, any withdrawal of that consent for the sharing of data, is something that I think we're going to need to see more in, especially as AI gets applied to public sector applications, government applications, and even public benefit types of applications. So think about data and even AI models as having a provenance and kind of a path, and perhaps not even unlike, say, the path of a diamond from one place to another. And you start to see some places where that starts to become relevant. I don't think there's much application for blockchain technology to kind of, strip AI of models, machine learning models, or really strip the data sets of bias. But hopefully it helps us bring more transparency into where the data is coming from and how trustworthy are those models.
We're rounding out in sort of the last 5 minutes. and as such, I think I'm going to try to focus both sort of internationally big at a 10,000 foot scale, and then combine that question with the group for sort of the domestic question, and to have you each sort of try your best navigating those two. When you think about blockchain and AI technology writ large, at a 10,000 foot sort of global level, it's increasingly viewed as a kind of strategic priority, right? Almost even a geostrategic question, and which raises a kind of question as to to what degree is that race playing itself out in more sort of bespoke systems, including the artisanal blockchain space, and and do you see both positive or negative externalities associated with that sort of geostrategic question? And then locally, no matter how that plays out sort of internationally through, between governments, how can, we as a community begin to steer and guide the development of technology, and in particular blockchain technology, in a way that is actually deployed and used for the social good? I think I'll go around with each of you for a short answer, and because I think that there could be some really interesting contrasts. So I'll start maybe with Richard.
So today, I think the biggest, that I'm saying a strong word, potential of blockchain is not included in the debate. The ability to tokenize any financial claim and asset and create an exchange for that, because if there is an exchange, then efficient pricing and setting of priorities can be organized. And we have to make society efficient in its process to address all the problems. So this scope has to be done, and this is also where governments can play a key role. So short statement from me.
Eva, as a member of the, I will ask you also this geostrategic question, and also at a community level, like how do you view the politics of blockchain technology playing out, and then what can people do locally for their communities to make sure that it's deployed in a way that is socially viable and useful?
Well, okay, that's a complex one, but let me say that from the beginning, and on our side, what we're trying to do is to provide a legal framework so that people will feel they can be creative and they can feel safe to test the technology. I think GDPR, as Brian also mentioned, it's a good start because it gives you the principles, like the compass that you have to follow, and then you can be creative around that, but you know where you have to go, so you can experiment too. So let's say we will start with the principles. We know the European principles. We know that everything that is legal off blockchain or off the technology should be also the same on the technologies. I think that data governance, as I mentioned, is very important on our behalf, so that SMEs will have also access to good quality data, and we will be able to allow more companies to flourish, and not just the big ones to completely control all the space. And then we definitely have to focus on quality standards. So I think this would be the essence of everything we do. And because if we manage to give the tools to the SMEs, entrepreneurs, and the innovation ecosystem, I think then we will see also the results, and we will see the empowerment of communities. So the result will be the empowerment of communities, because they will be able to have the tools and be able to take advantage of the tools, and have the feeling of being secure to explore. So the sandboxes are delaying in Europe, in the European level. But as I said, if we set up initially a legal certain framework, then they will be able to give us the best of their ideas. Until now, I have the feeling that we have a lot of interesting ways that communities have been working with blockchain, and that locally there are solutions that have been tested and they have been working. I have many examples on how people have been using these technologies. And so actually you could have local ideas and solutions that work even better than the big ones, right, in a larger scale. So I think this is what we have to do. We have to make sure that everybody can explore the ground and can be innovative without always trying to make sure to go immediately on a large scale. And of course, we have ideas with even with smart agriculture on how you can get a lot of data from sensors that you can now get, combine technologies. And I think this is actually where the revolution, the next revolution, will be combining AI with blockchain, with IoT, with sensors, and be able to use the data to automate processes. So you can save water because you know that it's not the time now. You can understand where you have to intervene. You can have a clear understanding of how the supply chain is being interrupted or not, and that you have to solve a problem that you face there. I think also the pandemic was an eye-opener for Europeans. They realized we have all the tools, we have all the technologies, and we don't know how to use them. And why? Because we didn't need to, and because the system was resisting in all the levels. So we had huge interruptions in the supply chains of the masks. So we couldn't get the masks in Italy where they needed the most, because of different weird frictions we had in our borders. So I think we could have overcome all these problems and find solutions there.
Yeah, I think that what that illustrates, and I think we're gonna have to I think that what we're going to have to sort of end it with that conversation, which is, there's clearly a lot of applications. There's clearly quite a bit further to go. But the coronavirus both, points us to a world where you can see an extraordinary amount of opportunity at a time where there is also the most crisis and dislocate, the most dislocation and stress. Our time is up, and the GBBC works on a very strict timetable that I am going to obey. But I do want to thank all of the panelists. This was a really informative and thoughtful discussion, and I look forward both personally as well as in my relationship with the GBBC to keep in touch with you. Your insight is invaluable. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.